Welcome to One Bills Lite, your stat-intensive discussion on the Bills and the NFL. Coming up, will the Bills be a league leader in spread formations on offense? And what did Week 1 tell us about that possibility? Steve is quizzed on it in the numbers game, and in these three things, just how much does Josh Allen own the Dolphins? Time to warm up the bus!
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual-role player for you. Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Lite, your stat examination of the Bills and the NFL. Chris Brown and Steve Tasker with you as usual. And we begin, Steve, with Buffalo's offensive identity that maybe revealed itself to some degree, certainly last season, but this season, the usage of 10 personnel or 4 wide with a single back. Buffalo was second in the league in its usage on offense last year, with Arizona the only team that utilized it more. In Week 1 this season, the Bills turned to it often on their 79 plays run on offense against the Steelers in the home opener. They went 4 wide or more, or they went 4 wide, on more than 38% of their plays. Last season, they went 4 wide just 14% of the time. Granted, this is a one-game sample. I think we expect those numbers to vacillate. 50-cent word.
That's nice. Vacillate.
But thank you. But more than 38%. That is a fat number.
It is, and I think it has more to do with, I don't know that there's a trend in the NFL doing it, but it's a trend towards what the Bills roster and where the strength of their roster lies in their wide receiver room, and the fact that they got a strong-arm quarterback. And I think it also was a little bit to do with the matchup they thought they were going to be able to get from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe they thought that the Bills thought that they could break up the front 7 of the Steelers and get maybe 6 in the box, 5 in the box, and be able to make some hay and give Josh Allen a chance to be more pass protection, use his mobility a little bit. Steelers did a great job of keeping him in the pocket and pressuring him as well. So I think that's where the strength of the Bills roster lies. I'm not going to extrapolate it into the NFL at large and say, hey, I think everybody's going to head this way.
Yeah.
Maybe they will. The last couple of drafts, we've seen a ton of wide receivers come into the league. And if you get really good players, you want to get
advantage of them.
You want to get them on the field.
Yeah.
And if you got a big wide receiver room full of talent, that's where your offense is going to head down, and I think that's where the Bills are right now.
I agree. I believe the strength of this offense still lies in its receiving core. I think the miscalculation in Week 1 was, A, underestimating the front 3/4 of the Steelers in terms of your front 5 being able to capably protect Josh Allen. And then the second big issue in the game in Week 1 was Josh basically admitting this week that I was looking more top to bottom in my progressions and looking to make a play than I was bottom to top. And really, when you think about it, the way the Steelers were able to bracket off those deeper, longer patterns, the underneath stuff was there for Josh to take. He just didn't take it in the game. And so I think going forward, he will look to do more of that to facilitate the rhythm of this offense, which runs through their short to intermediate passing game, which in turn opens up the deep stuff maybe later on in the course of a ball game. Taking this a step further, though, Steve, the Bills also made use of 0 personnel or 5 receivers with an empty backfield in Week 1. 13% of their plays called. In Week 1, essentially 0 personnel replaced the use of 10 personnel from last year in terms of frequency. So to sum up, the Bills went with 4 or 5 receivers on the field against the Steelers on 44% of their offensive plays in Week 1. And again, this probably won't be every week, but in your mind, even in this spread them out trend that we're seeing in the NFL these days, was it ambitious, even with the talent the Bills have on their roster, to spread the field that much?
I think, a little bit. I mean, I think it's a nod to how much confidence they have in that room and how much confidence that Josh Allen gave them last year that he could handle it. Certainly, Josh didn't play as well as we'd seen him play or, throw it as well as we saw him throw it all last year. And I think, you can chalk it up to a hiccup to start the season, playing against a really good defensive front that threw a wrench into it. Still a very close game, and you get the offenses scored identical amount of points, 16 apiece, but you throw in the block punt, and it turns into a touchdown loss. The Bills probably still thought they could win that football game, all things being equal, and for sure thought they were going to win that football game. Going in with that game plan. And I think you got to know and got to have confidence that you were in the right sets. And if you just execute them a little better, even a game like the Steelers that was a touchdown down, you were 10 points down in halfway through the fourth quarter. Execute better, and that's a much different football game. And I think the players, when they sit there and watch the film, they're going to get the feeling like, hey, this is on us. It had nothing to do with the 5 wide, the 4 wide, all of that. That was where we should have been, and we should have scored about 21 more points than we did.
I think if you look at the game, and after Josh and the rest of the offensive players did that, I think they realized that the protection problems would not have been a problem if Josh's decision-making went to the short stuff, taking what the defense gave him earlier in the game. It would have neutralized the effectiveness of the pass rush because the ball would have been out. And I think if they kind of drift back to that end of their passing game identity, they'll be much more successful going forward. Just for reference, last season in Week 2 against Miami, the same opponent they have this week, the Bills offense used 4 wide sets on 17% of their offensive snaps, but never went 5 wide, which is a new look for them this year. Do we think the Bills will mimic more of what they did Week 1 this season against the Dolphins Sunday, or be a more balanced offense this time around with the run game and their most popular 3 wide with a tight end and a back?
I wouldn't be surprised they go 5 wide.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think they got some confidence in it, and with a week under their belt, as a preseason game, so to speak, to get more comfortable with it and against a live defense, I think they'll feel more comfortable doing it. They'll be able to shore some things up. I think one thing, you think about the Pittsburgh game, that's a game where this offense probably feels like it missed opportunities to throw points up on the board. And I think it's not only the fact that, they wouldn't take the short stuff and stay on the field. I think it's also their red zone offense, which was a problem.
Yep.
They couldn't punch it in. And so that's more about execution of the players rather than the game plan or the personnel usages or that kind of thing, because there were plays there to be made. And when you got plays there to be made, that's what the coaching staff's job is. The players got to put it on themselves. I think this week there'll be conversations about how the Dolphins are a little bit different than the Steelers in their defensive front and their strengths and weaknesses. But it doesn't change the Bills' strengths and weaknesses. So I think you will see some 5 wide, 4 wide this week against the Dolphins.
They do go a little deeper than the Steelers do at the corner position. The Dolphins do. So it'll be interesting to see how they view those matchups, which will likely predicate what personnel groupings they choose to turn to. And yes, it's a 3-4 front, much like the Steelers, but it's played a little bit differently. They rely on their linebackers to cover a good deal, and that could be an advantage for Buffalo as well. We'll just have to wait and see. To be clear, 11 personnel with 1 back and 1 tight end is still Buffalo's most popular personnel grouping, as it is for a lot of offenses around the league, but the use of 4 and 5 wide sets by the Bills is the subject of this week's numbers game as we put Steve to the test. Steve, are you ready?
I am so ready.
So realizing it is just 1 week of data, the Bills went 4 or 5 wide in the Week 1 game against the Steelers, as we said, on 44% of their plays. 33 of their 70 snaps were in 4 or 5 wide. Where do you believe that ranked across the league in Week 1, Steve?
Man, I'll say he's got to be number 1.
It was number 1 in the league by far.
Yeah, nobody goes 5 wide.
By far. So second part of the numbers game, Steve, we did a rankings list last year on 10 personnel or 4 wides. Which teams, do you believe are the top 5 teams in usage of 4 wide personnel after 1 week of play?
Top 5 teams that went 5 wide in the NFL.
No, I'll give you 4 and 5
4 and
wide.
5. Okay, 4 and 5.
Because we know the Bills are number one.
Okay.
They went on 44%
so they were
of
number
their
2 last year
offensive
to
snaps.
Arizona. I'm going to say Arizona.
Arizona is number 2.
So it's Buffalo, Arizona.
So listen to this. Buffalo, 44% of their offensive plays. Arizona was second, 18%.
Oh, jeez. Like over. Okay.
So see if you can
All right.
get. We're
All
going
right,
to see
so
if you
it's
can get a few of the next.
Buffalo, Arizona. I'll say somebody like Seattle.
Not Seattle.
Okay. Another team that was big. I'll say New Orleans.
Not New Orleans.
All right. Now I'm
Looking for spread them out teams. Now, there was a team last year that used a good deal of 10 personnel. They were right up there or right behind Buffalo and Arizona. And they are 5th on the list after one game played.
the Chiefs.
The Chiefs are 4th. Yes, they're one of the teams, not the one I was thinking of. 5% of their plays were
Okay,
in
so
10
I got
personnel.
3 of them.
Got 3 of them. You need 2 more.
Carolina.
Not Carolina. Successful team last year. Playoff team.
The Pack.
Not the Pack, no.
Oh, Pittsburgh.
Not Pittsburgh.
Really?
Nope.
Because
There are a lot of 11
They
personnel.
didn't run it at all last year.
No, there are a lot of, they go 11 a lot.
That was a good guess by me. Thank you.
That was not bad.
I have to give myself kudos because nobody else. Bills, Arizona.
I will tell you, the last 2
Chiefs.
teams in the top 5 are NFC teams. One made the playoffs, one did not.
NFC.
And I would
playoff.
think of teams, as you said here on this podcast, with good receiving cores, like
Right.
deep receiving cores, really good top 2, and it goes even further than that at the receiver position.
All right. I will say my next one is Minnesota.
Minnesota, correct. 3rd on the list.
Oh, okay.
The last team is the playoff team from the NFC that I'm shocked you haven't guessed yet.
Oh, the Rams.
Not the Rams. They're 11 personnel all day, all day, all day.
Oh, Tampa.
Tampa Bay. 4.6% of their plays in week 1 against the Cowboys. So those are your top 5
That
using
seems like
4 and 5 wide personnel.
The opening game on Thursday night last week seems like it was a month ago.
I know, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh.
So here, we're going to skip. We
are right in the middle. We're in the season now.
Yeah.
Everything is like coming downhill.
We're going to skip the second
There's a
part.
game tonight.
Yeah, well, yeah. We're going to skip the second part of the numbers game because we want to go right to the third part, which is how many. So you just gave us the top 5,
Right.
in terms of teams that used
Buffalo,
4
Arizona,
and 5 wide
Chiefs,
personnel the most in week 1.
Minnesota and Rams.
So the second
Or
part of
Tampa.
this question: how many other teams in the league used 5 wides in their week 1 game?
Oh, okay.
From
How
that
many
list.
overall? Out
Yeah,
of 32
because,
teams.
Because we just had a top 5 ranking of 4 and 5 wide, right?
Right.
How many of them actually used 5 wide last week besides the Bills? How many other teams?
3.
1. And it was Jacksonville.
Really?
And they used it for 1 snap. The Bills had 9 snaps of 5 wide empty
Nobody
backfield.
else had more than 1.
Jacksonville's the only other team that ran 5 wide, and they did it for 1 play.
To me, that is a nod to that is just old school. You know?
Yeah.
It's just old school. Nobody wants to go because here's the thing. At some point in almost every single game, even at this stage in history of the NFL, you got to line up and beat somebody up. You got to line up and run it. You got to line up and push guys against their will. You got to be physical. So nobody has the wherewithal to go 5 wide. With the current roster size, nobody has the personnel combinations or the quality at every to go 5 wide with guys you trust and can make hay with, and then get those guys off the field, go 3 tight and 2 backs
And pound
push people around. Nope, you can't do it with 47 guys on game day.
You got to do one or the other, basically.
Yeah. You don't have enough quality guys because here's the thing: if you have quality guys that do that, you want them on the field, or they're squawking, or somebody's squawking. Hey, why aren't you? You got these guys. Why don't you have them on the field more?
Yeah.
And you got 5 guys. Nobody's got that many really good players that can win matchups in the NFL at 5 wide and then come down and win in the run game with 2 tights or 3 tight. Those guys are hard to find.
It is. It's interesting because, when you see Gabe Davis and Jake Kumaro on the field, chances are it's a run because those guys block.
They're big.
They block.
Yeah.
So
Kumaro's a physical dude.
So good job on the numbers game there. We'll continue to follow the Bills' offensive personnel usage as the season moves along here on this podcast. We move along to our popular segment called These 3 Things, which can vary from league-wide trends to statistical anomalies to some kind of streak. It's all fair game. So first on the list of these 3 things is forcing turnovers. As we know, Buffalo came close but did not force any turnovers in their Week 1 loss to the Steelers, had an interception called back on a penalty. Miami, meanwhile, forced 3 fumbles against the Patriots last week, recovered 2 of them, which were instrumental in helping them notch a 1-point victory in Foxborough. The Dolphins now have a takeaway in 23 straight games, stretching back to the 2019 season. It's the longest takeaway streak in the NFL since 2013. You want to guess which was the last team to successfully avoid turning the ball over in a matchup with the Dolphins?
Buffalo.
You are correct.
I was right?
Buffalo is the last team to not commit a turnover against the Dolphins. It was the Bills on November 17th, 2019, a 37-20 victory at Miami. That is so delicious. Okay, so usually, Steve.
Who was the Bills' quarterback then?
It was, same guy. Usually, Steve, they say takeaways come in bunches, but rarely do we see teams run off a streak of getting at least 1 per game like Miami has done. So what do we make of that?
I think it's interesting because you would think a team that scores a lot of points would have the other team putting the ball at risk more than.
But they don't score a lot.
They don't score a lot.
That's why I'm so perplexed here, because you usually don't see consistency with takeaways for this long of a stretch.
And Dolphins have good corners, so they pick the ball off some.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, I don't know if there is an exclamation for it, because even this last game, it was 3 forced fumbles. It wasn't like they were picking the ball off and New England was like throwing it all over the yard. I don't know. I don't know if you can make anything of it. I think it's an arbitrary number.
In many cases, the history of this league will tell you, yes, that is unquestionably the case. It's pure happenstance. Sure, you can make efforts to strip the ball away or get the ball out, but recovering it is a whole other thing. If you on a fumble, interception, and
the ball bounces strange.
23 straight games. That's pretty impressive.
You know what? The only common denominator is Brian Flores.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. And there's probably a handful of defensive players that are still in this lineup since he came on board. And you say, okay, well, maybe those are considered constants as well. They know the system,
whatever.
all of that. But that's an impressive streak. It really is. We'll see if the Bills can end it on Sunday. It will certainly help their cause in winning a game on the road this week if they can do that. Second on the list of these 3 things is Josh Allen's ownership of the Dolphins when it comes to head-to-head matchups. Allen, as we know, 5-1 against Miami, 17 touchdowns, 4 picks, a 114.3 rating. He's also rushed for 340 yards on 35 carries for a fat 9.7 average. Those are his highest figures against any opponent, both totals and per-game averages. Bills fans witnessed something that lasted a lot longer than what Josh has done to Miami with Brady, who did that to a good number of teams, including the Bills, for the better part of 2 decades. What is it about Miami as an opponent, Steve, that you think seems to bring out the best in Josh? Anything there, or just?
I think in Miami, when they play in Miami, the conditions are always perfect, or have been. He was in that first game. The only game he's lost is the one where he absolutely put the entire team on his back. Mm-hmm. Last game of the 2019 season where Charles Clay dropped a pass in the end zone that would have won the game. It's I don't know if you can. So many things change year to year, and over the course of 2 years, which is what we're talking about, 3 years, a lot of things are different,
Right.
including Josh. Now, here's the thing, too. Josh owned everybody last year.
He did, for the most part. Yeah.
That's a third of the games he's played against the Miami Dolphins. But you even think about last year's Week 17 game, where he was going to. They didn't even know if he was going to play. And then he did played all the way to halftime or a little into that.
223 passing yards and 3 touchdowns and a half.
And he tore them up. Now that offense last year was humming and beating everybody up, and there's no question about it. And at that point of the season, the Bills' offense was absolutely singing.
Yeah, they were annihilating.
They were absolutely crushing people. So there's that. And then they caught them early in the season when nobody knew how good the Bills' offense was going to be. So
And Miami thought they could play them man-to-man, and they were sorely mistaken.
I think all of it. I don't think it comes from so much the fact, for you and me, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And Miami is this, and Miami is that, and Josh owns. You know where I think it does come down to when he was beating them when he wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Because this last year, the whole team was great. You would expect them to win. Even if Josh didn't play his best, that's a team that Buffalo's going to beat.
But that's the thing. He was beating them even before that.
He was
before this
beating them.
team reached critical mass.
Right. The team was not – that's where this comes from. It's from the way he started off against them early in his career when he was still forming his identity. And the game we talk about, the loss is really the one that really personifies this whole thing. He almost beat him by himself.
I still remember coming in here when you guys were doing One Bills Live, you and Murph. I come in Monday after the games to talk to you guys about the game, and I look at Murph and I said, the Bills have their quarterback. He's like, what? I was like, mark it down. It's done. He's their guy. Yeah. And he goes, they didn't win. I said, I don't care. Did you see what he did on Sunday?
Yeah.
I said he put the team on his back
Yes.
and almost single-handedly won that game. He ran for 135 yards on 9 carries in that game.
and some of those runs, Kiko Alonso still lays awake at night.
He's still spinning.
He still lays awake at night thinking about those runs. One time, Josh turned him in circles.
He spun him into
and
retirement.
the second time, he flat outran him around the end for a huge gain. Just flat outran him, left him in the dust. And Kiko had the angle. That game alone, you're right. I was right there with you. Right, that game alone told Bills fans this is the guy.
Jump on board.
We are jumping on board now. It may not be long term. We may not, but for now, the quarterback spot is set.
It's this guy.
Build it around it.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. I think it goes back in time to when he was young and had nothing to work with and lit him up.
Yeah.
And in a loss. So, as crazy as it sounds, I think that's where this whole thing comes from. It may not, prove to be the thing that happens, overall. But man, oh man.
There's an inherent confidence when he steps on the field down there in Miami, like, I've always done well against this team. And I just think that buoys your mindset when you go into the game, where even if maybe a couple of things don't go exactly right at the outset, you're like, I've handled this team before.
Right.
It'll come together here. Let me just let the game come to me kind of thing. And hopefully he has the presence of mind to do that. And if he has to lean on past success to kind of boost his confidence all the more, especially after an inconsistent week last week, well, then all the better.
In particularly in this game, matchup this week specifically, having a bounce-back game coming into Miami is, I think, it spells a much different outcome.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Week.
The third thing on our 3 things list is play in the red zone. Buffalo, as we know, went just 1 for 4 in the red zone this past week on offense. Miami's red zone defense was equally successful, holding New England out of the end zone on 3 of their 4 opportunities last week to post the 1-point win. Buffalo in the red zone against the Dolphins last season, Steve, 6 for 6 in the 2 games. I realize every year is different, but what do we think we witness on Sunday in red zone situations, Bills offense, Dolphins defense?
Think about it from the Bills' perspective. That lost them the game last week. They're going to put some time in on it. They were very good there last year. And I think if you want to see how creative Brian Daboll can be we saw it on the fourth down where, it didn't work, and he took some heat for it with the throwback thing, trying to get around the edge last week on the fourth down, and the Steelers were in perfect position. But I think that those kind of situational things, particularly in the red zone, where you'll see Brian Daboll be the most creative. And I've loved their red zone offense under Josh. He gives them that dynamic where we've seen, 2 years ago, they snap in the ball in shotgun. He tucks it away and they go. Everybody goes out in front of him. They head right towards the pylon. That was part of their red zone package. That's still in the bank there, and his ability to do that is an issue with the quarterback. We saw it in the playoff game against Indianapolis, where he options it, turns it in, boom, early touchdown with him running the football standing up off the edge.
And then later in the game, he runs out wide again, draws the entire defense, and shot puts it to Dawson Knox.
So all that dynamic with Josh Allen as your quarterback opens things up for the red zone. Mac Jones doesn't give you that in New England. He's not running the ball in. Josh Allen will. And not only will he run it in, he'll bang it in. That gives the Bills' red zone offense a big boost against a team like Miami, particularly one who just put one of their best defensive tackles on IR in Raekwon Smith.
Yeah, their nose tackle will not play this week. But here's how I look at it. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, you had trouble in the red zone last week. Why don't you activate Zach Moss and use him to pound it in the red zone? I don't know if you do that against this Miami team, because if there's one thing Miami is good at, it's bowing up at the line of scrimmage. Big, heavy defensive linemen, big stack, in the hole, linebackers. I think you race them to the edge. This is not a long chase front seven. And so
right.
I think you can use speed to the edge here to your advantage, even in the red zone. I would be surprised if they try to just mash at the line of scrimmage, in the red zone in particular, in goal-to-go situations. I think they work the edges of the formation, knowing that this Miami defense isn't great in pursuit from the backside, long chase players, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Jerome Baker's a good long chase player, the middle linebacker,
right.
But outside of him, you don't have a lot of speed demons in that front seven.
It's hard to do in the red zone, but one thing you want to get a defense doing in the red zone is going side to side. You don't want them in your backfield. You don't want them penetrating. Mm-hmm. Like even you can picture it, even when you pack it in there and go, tight ends, tight and stuff, the thing that crushes it is penetration. That's the way it is for everybody. So if you can get guys like that who aren't long chase players thinking they got to get to the sideline to get them going that way, change the direction's an issue. So you could see end arounds or back and forth kind of plays or throwback kind of plays, or getting the ball out of Josh's hands to the sideline quick and trying to punch it in that way. You'll see some of that, I think, maybe, to get this defense spread thin, because that's where the space is. The reason it's hard to score in the red zone is the end line of the end zone. The defense doesn't have to retreat. You can't take the top off the defense. The back line does that. So the space becomes sideline to sideline, and that's where you have to find it. And that's why Josh running the corner is a good idea, and throwing the football out there quick to Diggs is a good idea, all of that.
Let's not forget, last year against the Bills, Brian Flores put 6, sometimes 7 defensive backs on the field defensively against the Bills. I thought that was an indication that he knew his linebackers could not hang with the skill position players on this team. They had a speed deficiency. He knew it, so he put faster players on the field. The question is, if they see that again, do the Bills counterpunch with a power run game and just run over all those DBs?
Right.
So maybe Zach Moss is active, but maybe not for red zone, for stuff between the 20s, if, in fact, the Dolphins throw 7 DBs out there again.
If that happens, you throw Devin Singletary out there or Zach Moss out there, but you run a couple of plays, first and second down, if you can get, and you've got them split out wide. And they say, well, if they're going to do that, we're going to counter. We got to throw another DB out there to get into the secondary. Then when they do that, you go no huddle. You bring Moss into the formation, and then you run it when they get that other DB in or other 2 DBs in, and you take advantage of the size if you can. Miami will have some ideas about that as well. So
you got to catch them and go tempo.
Right, you got to go tempo.
Can't sub.
If they get guys out there that you think you match up one way or the other, run or pass, that's what you do, and you do it fast.
It's going to be a fun cat and mouse game. between
Yes.
the Bills offense and the Dolphins.
And it's going to be
defense.
hard, too, because none of us know. I don't know exactly what the Bills' identity is going to be, and neither do the Dolphins. And the Dolphins don't know exactly what their identity is going to be because it's week 2.
Yeah.
So we found out a little bit in week 1. Now let's see. See if we can find out a little more.
That'll do it for this edition of One Bills Lite, where we do all the work of crunching the numbers so you can enjoy them. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you in another podcast form in a couple of weeks as we unveil our newly branded podcast with a special sponsor. Keep your eyes and ears open, everybody. You'll see us real soon.